Said the country's extreme isolation as a result of the COVID pandemic has worsened its already denied human rights record. Tomato players in Canada, the government has opposed the COVID law during the self-imposed coronavirus blockade, while most diplomats have left the country. They have urged Pyongyang to reopen its borders to the investors. This is Andrew. Our people, how can we do it? All of us want to be destroyed, but then the ultimate will be automatically executed. On each of we have. This one is going on. So the death toll in Slovenia exceeds 3,000 people. That's really expected to see that on many thousands of this. Many people are going into a country where efforts to get humanitarian aid through to an estimated 300,000 people to attract people into the community. And the party that's in the president of Ukraine, Alexander holding the civilians hostage despite all the efforts from those who have been able to get them. Corridors when people are trying to about the ground, and their accounts are absolutely heartrending about the time, the pain, and fear they had to suffer while living for weeks in basically shelters, without much food, without water, without heating. I was looking at the accounts from one of the rescue families, but over to look just to the south of the story. One of the neighbors that was God left Mariupol. She was afraid of everything that she saw. For 20 days, she said, I was dying with my city. I was in hell. You're hearing various versions of a living hell, hell on earth, a city like Aftermath, and so many of the survivors. And of course, the suffering died, and the After, some of us from so much of our heart. The war, so the Ukrainians are fighting back, and we do know that in Mariupol, this is Ukrainian army, and there is no battalion, and many people will break this to the Ukrainian army, and of course, as we report, can't be verified, but tens of thousands of people potentially are being forcibly removed from Mariupol and taken to Russia. Yes, so there's been a report from the tax news agency that 62,000 people left Mariupol and traveled into Russia. Now, we have no way of verifying if those people went voluntarily. What we do know is that days ago, officials in the city said that people would be forcibly removed from shelters. They mentioned a large sports arena where a large number of people had been taken from early 6 days been forced to leave. The New York Times spoke to people in the city and the residents they spoke to confirmed those facts that they knew neighbors and friends who had also been forced to leave under those circumstances. But we have heard during the evening fights in Washington saying that it was this is misery upon misery that it's not those who have been forced to leave and then been forced to go on Russian media and say, express gratitude to the safety here in the picture of the American rescue that they died in. One of the places in Kyiv, 67 shopping centers, and it was near on the Russian I'm sure my name is narrated with military words. In this, everyone ought to be waiting. I just wish that wasn't be Sunday. 3 days ago, a friend of mine was making visits and told us that there was a guy here on the hill. The restaurant had a lot going on. And one of the town's leg and head was away. The dream of me saying, I don't know for long. I don't know, but I think this is my first. On the other hand, there will be no barriers during the party. This is what the police said to us when we saw them on the street. And asked them what to do and get them up to family. They asked us about it. I wonder how many of us can get that. Our apartment building on the family is the only one not contested as I was here. It was indirectly on the structure of the track. Past windows with layouts and tin apartments. But the building is partly foundation and has been left until it's the whole yard is layered pitch, dark, with the top is metal. I try not to look at the piece of ice that's embedded in the playground. I think it's a rocket. In the third floor window, I see someone think. It's turned out that I'm afraid. And I know it doesn't help. I understand that I have some shaking again now. I get out and do my guess, and there's a cemetery not far from the house. There are no cars, no boys, no children. Everyone very conventional. I don't know. I think it's okay. I don't know. And in the cargo. I don't want to look at them. I'm afraid I'll see something like this. All night in my city now exists in the basement. I try to cry. I really can't. I feel sorry for myself. I for my family, my husband, my neighbours, my friends. I go back to the basement. It's been 2 weeks, and I can't believe there was once another. People who live in the basement of the moon. Every day it's harder for them. They have no water, food, light. They can't even go outside because it's a constant shelling. Very hard for them to come forward. Help them. Let everyone know that children keep the people. part of applications into the concentrations already considered. You have enough supply. We already ordered a lot, and we have promised we will see a lot. Which I believe that a lot of these different knowledge applications for this definitely a lot. So for transportation, we can ask for because we have like lots of places planned that we have done. Remaining and it's not that easy because you're talking about the majority of the sort of things that you look after now being more fairly in I guess, needing the help of doctors like yourself. So have you sort of moving yourself to Western Ukraine or somewhere else in China? I definitely would make it more useful in Western part, but you know, I have a number of colleagues from my institute from other hospitals that already moved to Western Ukraine. There's surgeries there. For example, if you understand that there are multiple doctors in Western Ukraine, so like it will be overflow with patients, it will be overflow with doctors. So we don't know what happens tomorrow. Definitely it's not supposed to be the and it's thinking about moving faster. But so far, it's not okay. I believe that my case here is for my patients and for people who are their own friends who use that as the local like or you know, units 35 units. So by being here, it will kind of like communicating with the actual people around you. They see that you stay here, so they just stay. Actually founded in the late 18th century on the Russian Empress Catherine the Great. The rescue questioning people and noise. They followed activities opened up, allowed people to make it from the steps leading to the city centre. Warning, alert, stay safe, the war is inching closer to a victor by the day. And Celeste is editor-in-chief of Ukraine, and the litigation in Odessa. Actually, tell me what this has been there today.
Yes, this morning we've been sharing on the Navy artillery from the Russian ships, and the fact that has been the first ships artillery against Odessa before the Second World War. We previously experienced direct attacks at the suburbs, but not something that over the use of the Navy. And that destroyed a few houses in the suburbs, and definitely brought a lot of panic here in that district because of this situation. Still, we cannot say that that's been carried out completely comparing to other towns around the country.
But in getting people in Odessa, they must have been preparing themselves for this moment. They must have been expecting this to come.
We have been relaxed for these 3 weeks or so because we hear sirens of the air defense and the words of the air defense because we've experienced a number of military drones coming to the town each day and they've been shouting at the villagers nearby. So I can't say that the city being not prepared for the Navy and coastal artillery and air defense forces are constantly on high alert. That's for sure. But you don't think that definitely different when they come into the land.
There are many reasons why Odessa is so significant. Let's talk about it from a military perspective first of all. It's a huge port on the Black Sea, and that's fundamentally why it would be so important for Russia to want to take it.
That is exactly. That is the biggest seaport in Ukraine and one of the biggest in the Black Sea. But you also need to understand that when we think about ports, we're talking about so-called Odessa. That is the three biggest seaport, one from another 30 kilometers. That definitely creates a conglomerate that for approximately 60-70% of the Ukrainian export. So that's very important both for the economic situation, but also for the security because Odessa is the base for the Ukrainian Navy after the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And we are also expected to proceed to the separatist region of Moldova controlled by the Russian Federation. So that's why Odessa region is important both as the route to Moldova and as the coastal protection of the region.
And that's the practicality of it, for want of a better word. For many of us outside Ukraine, Odessa is associated with amazing 19th century architecture, or the opera, or the ballet, the arts, all sorts of things that are based there.
Honestly, that is the downtown, and one of the main sources of the lookout that Russians will think twice that shelling costs really hadn't dialed as what you saw in Kharkiv or Mariupol. Because definitely Kharkiv didn't have any emotional connection to the Russian situation and they needed to parachute after the January protest. But Odessa has these clear the memory and pictures that the international community knew it so many times, but also for the Russians, because that being the third city in the Russian Empire, and before 2014, Russians used to spend their holidays here. You can find it in movies and in different cultural events and everywhere. So honestly, we're really hoping that probably they will think twice before hand because they don't want these pictures to be in the international news. That immediately will touch the hearts not only of the international community, but of the Russians themselves.
Celestia, editor-in-chief of Ukraine, Analytica, quickly from Odessa.
You're listening to One Campus. Join people of Gatehouse for a story of his first Saturday top different reality. This is a journey through the dark undergrowth of modern America. Counting the past that led to the storm of Detroit in Washington, D.C. last year. It's a strange and twisted tale that has been bubbling beneath the surface in American society for decades.
What do we do? The stakes here are very high.
From the conspiracy theories of the 1990s to the darkest corners of the internet. Did this all just happen? Or is it being coordinated?
I think I bear some responsibility for where we are today as a country.
Do you think this is big? You can get decided. The coming story at bbcworldservice.com.
Using our next 30 minutes, EU Defence and Foreign Ministers approved a new defence strategy for the bloc, latest from the meeting in Brussels. As gas and oil prices rise, the hydrogen will be the answer to Europe's energy needs. And the war poems of 2022, sharing personal experiences of the conflict in Ukraine within days. All the way new now with me, Andrew Beach. Do stay with us.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his country will never bow to ultimatums from Russia to surrender its biggest cities. Kiev refused an offer of what Moscow termed safe passage for those in Mariupol if they laid down their arms. Mr. Zelensky says Ukrainians would have to approve any compromise agreed with Russia. The first international journalists have arrived in those parts of Mariupol now controlled by Russian forces. The Reuters news agency describes an apocalyptic wasteland where apartment blocks are all charred black. A report in a Russian newspaper has indicated that almost 10,000 Russian servicemen have been killed since the start of the invasion. The figures, which were published on Sunday, were later removed. Russia's foreign minister not called the U.S. ambassador in London to protest their comments by President Trump in this week called Netflix meeting for war criminal. The ministry said that Russian-American relations to breaking point. European Union defense and foreign ministers have approved a new strategy to strengthen U.S. defense. They would need to take a new forward in the present global security environment. The EU's foreign policy chief viewed it as a turning point and very timely. In other news, the United States has formally declared that the violence against the Rohingya minority committed by Myanmar's army amounts to genocide and crimes against humanity. The Secretary of State said that they would come for those responsible answer for what he called falling acts, really aimed at destroying the Rohingya Muslims. And the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee is holding 4 days of hearings on the nomination of the first black woman to the Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson pledged independence, it confirmed, and said she prided herself in deciding cases from a neutral position. BBC News.
Welcome back to News Hour. Global gas prices continue to soar to record highs, driven in part by the conflict in Ukraine. There's renewed interest in using energy sources like hydrogen to reduce dependence on gas and oil. And a world first, a neighbourhood in Scotland is creating a 100% green hydrogen hydrogen network, heating and cooking. In terms of many European countries looking at how they can blend hydrogen into their gas networks. But Kelsey's here to find out more. Now, half a century on, the gas prices reached new record highs for the war in Ukraine. There's a plan to move away from methane and hydrogen into the UK's gas system. We're on this remote airbase near Hayton in Cumbria in the north of England, and high in the hills with sporadic thunderstorms sometimes touching low clouds. And it's here where that change is being tested. Good green and hydrogen from the national laboratories. Blending is taking the natural gas that we've stable in the network and starting with a very small quantity of hydrogen. It's just another gas. We mix it up at that point, and we push that down to the network instead. The user will not really notice any difference at all at low levels, and we just build this level up in time. We want to be ready for 2025 outputs, which is new gas to the network. So the networks completely on the lines of being brought here. They only carry methane across the 5,000-mile network for homes and businesses. Now they've been tested to blend hydrogen, and the growth is non-stop there. Eventually, we're going to replace natural gas completely with low-carbon hydrogen, either produced from wind or where natural gas is steamed and CO2 emissions are captured and stored. We need hydrogen production to start in the UK, so we can actually take an injection of hydrogen onto the network. So realistically, is there going to be enough hydrogen to actually make this happen? So hydrogen production is planned to start here in the UK, and it's low-carbon hydrogen production in the northeast and northwest, right around the 2025 period. It's highly possible that we're going to do that. On top of that, we're doing quicker green hydrogen production, which is going to electrolyze water. So I think it's the largest scale of hydrogen on its own. Over this decade, we might see it in the planet. Can you really be a time where you are no longer putting natural gas these days into the national grid, and you're just putting hydrogen, green hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen into the grid? Yeah, it's not going to happen immediately. It's going to happen over a period of years. Using hydrogen as we can store it. So for the days that the winds are blowing, the sun's not shining, we've got hydrogen that we can actually run our power generation and running it around our network is the best way of doing that. Because Tony Green is head of hydrogen at the UK National Grid, talking to my colleague Rick Kelsey. You're listening to news now on the BBC. This is Andrew Creech in London with you now on the BBC World Service. European Union Defence and Foreign Minister approved a new plan to strengthen the cost defences, saying it needed to take a quantum leap forward in the current more hostile security environment. Minister Farrell is the EU representative for Foreign Affairs. We are not living in the world we would like to be. We live in the world of realities, and this world is changed. This world is challenged. Our neighborhood is in flames. In Gibraltar, Ukraine, we are surrounded by a circle of challenges, a dangerous situation, and we have to face them. And in that way, the Union has prepared the necessary a common security and defense policy. Our Brussels correspondent is Jessica Parker, so they're calling it a strategic compass. What does that mean?
Yes, one of those sorts of EU documents that has probably slightly darker sounding names, and it's basically a roadmap, a set of ambitions to have more coordination amongst EU member states on military intelligence, cyber, spending and procurement as well. Also trying to basically encourage member states to spend more on defence. We've already seen countries like Germany come forward and say they'll do that unilaterally. It also talks about this European peace facility, which is a primary term used to actually pay for weapons that are going into Ukraine. That is a first for the European Union. It hasn't sent weapons, or paid weapons, I should say, for active conflict before. And it also talks about this EU rapid deployment capacity. The aims to deploy up to 5,000 troops. But Josep Borrell saying this is not an EU army. Of course, the idea of an EU army is this rather mythical idea area that never appears, is often talked about. But it's not trying to be more assertive on the world stage. There's a serious actor that's able to protect its own security and interests. But as I say, in a roadmap of set of ambitions, it doesn't mean that everything in these bits of paper will actually come to pass in the next 5 to 10 years.
Now, what you described there is that this meeting was supposed to be about Ukraine, and indeed some other countries wanted it to be a discussion that also touched on what further sanctions could be taken against Russia. Did that get talked about?
So they got talked about it. It's interesting for ministers of Ireland before we have working on the subject of discussion. I'm not going to particularly trying to make really pushing out energy sanctions so to be people with embargo on Russian oil and gas because of concerning by buying Russian energy to paying for the Kremlin to fund the war. Now, why I once talked about actually what Joseph Borrell has come out and said this evening is that he doesn't expect any further package of sanctions this week. He said that procedurally it's something that might this moment. That doesn't really mean the leaders will be here in Brussels for a big summit later this week where we talk about it. But I think it's certainly true to say that member states are divided as to whether to go down that road.
What's the rationale for that? Because the appeal came quite directly from Vladimir Zelensky, basically saying that he was going to move another euro, another dollar. What's the argument against it?
So one argument I was speaking to a politician earlier this week about this very issue is they were saying, well, take for example Germany, one of the countries known to be reluctant to go down this road where everyone's trying to find ways of leading themselves off rather than cutting themselves off necessarily from Russian oil and gas and coal. But they're saying, what if you cut Germany off from those types of energy supplies? That will seriously damage the German economy. Now, will a weak German economy, a weak Germany, because businesses will have to close down, actually be a good thing for Europe, actually could be a good thing for an assertive Europe in the face of Russian aggression? Of course, realistically, politicians are very worried. They're worried about rising energy prices. They're worried, in some areas, public unrest. They're worried of people being incredibly unhappy if they can't afford like petrol or they can't afford to pay their bills as well. So there are political concerns as well as practical business concerns coming from some countries. But certainly there are those who take a harder line and say, well, the problem is so acute, you've got to act now.
Jessica Barton with me from Brussels. As further sanctions against Russia are under discussion there, the existing sanctions are starting to bite in Moscow. Monday's newspapers there showed pictures of empty supermarket shelves, leading the government to deny there's a shortage of sugar or wheat. The Moscow Exchange reopened the sun trading today after a 3-week absence. During the first hour, some firms fell to prices last seen in 2014. They don't yet know if or when trading stops will resume amid fears of a market collapse. Felix Lyons is from the Moscow Times. So, what's the fact that the Moscow Exchange reopened at all? Is it a success?
Well, in very limited chance, yes, I suppose. It's signalled at least a sort of confidence on the part of the Russian Central Bank and the part of the Russian authorities that they can sort of get through the day of trading. But of course, as you noticed yourself, this was a very, very, very limited reopening. Really, only the Russians were sort of trading government bonds. The stocks is quite a significant amount. That was where really damage was sort of felt while trading was open when the war began. And sort of there's a very real chance, I think, that a lot of Russian corporate listings like Russian stocks in Moscow could take some serious damage. And then I think a lot more exposed to the risks right now that being government bonds are.
Do you get a sense of the extent to which the existing sanctions are biting on the Russian economy? We know they're real, but how we actually see them?
Well, above all, I think it's sort of the real impact to be felt on the Russian sort of currency and the Russian central bank, most of all. The real nuclear option. We suggest that the Russian state wasn't ready for was sanctions on the central bank. Because, of course, the Russian central bank holds vast amounts of its reserves, some of the largest foreign exchange reserves, gold reserves, outside Russia. So when sanctions kick in, about half of Russia's reserves, something like $300 billion, an enormous amount of money, was sort of trapped in German banks, British banks, Japanese banks, and in American banks to some extent. But so that's what really hit hard. We see the state being increasingly unable to prop up the ruble, which of course makes the suffered real damage, which has made imports much
And Felix, despite what the Russian government might want us to believe, is there a shortage of basic items like sugar, like wheat?
Well, it remains to be seen. I think there are certain sort of terms of sort of panic buying. And of course, the Russian economy, despite sort of 8 years import substitution and this idea of fortress Russia, the economy sanctions, which is already a little very fashionable after the annexation of Crimea in 2014, that never really happened. Russia's economy, especially into the key areas like food, it really is very keenly tied into the Russian, to the global economy. Early last year, before there was even talk of a war in Ukraine, there were already sort of spiraling food prices because there was sort of a protectionist policy being followed by the Russian government. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we do see sort of quite acute shortages of staple goods right now. It's hard to sort of make a statement and sort of firm judgment about whether that's happening right now or whether it's simply panic buying. But certainly there is sort of a lot of alarm among Russian consumers at this stage.
Felix Marks from the Nottingham Times. Facebook and Instagram's activities have been deemed extremist by a court in Moscow and are banned in Russia. The Prosecutor General's office cited alleged posts calling for violence against Russian citizens and Russian military personnel in Ukraine. Although we noticed some hours later the Russian Defense Ministry put posting on Facebook itself. Vitaly Shevchenko is the Russia editor at BBC Monitoring and asked Vitaly why Facebook finds itself in this situation. The underlying reason why all of this is happening, of course, that the Russian government isn't really keen for the Russians to see all the videos and pictures of horrible developments happening in Ukraine. But we have to remember that Facebook has been banned in Russia for a while, blocked in Russia for a while, for more than 2 weeks now. As is Twitter, restrictions appears on Twitter as well, Instagram too. So in practical terms, little changes for your average Facebook, Twitter and Instagram user in Russia. The point of doing this now seems to be to target the parent company of Facebook and Instagram Meta. And a lot of people are scratching their heads in Russia trying to understand what the latest ruling means, and it seems to be designed to stop payments being made from Russia into the accounts of those companies. I think it did stop Russian people accessing social media platforms that they love. You would, yes, stop images that perhaps the Russian government wouldn't want their population to see, but you'd also stop messages from the Russian government that they very much want the Russian people to see. The reality is that Facebook isn't such a popular social network in Russia. Last time we had a credible survey, it was on 10%. Contacted, the most popular social network, was on 24%. But the way things are in Russia at the moment, most young people, they know how to circumvent these blocks. They've been using things like virtual private networks to bypass government blocks for a while now. So they will hardly see any difference. And the way it works in Russia, the government is trying to work it, but it's not really working. Okay, obviously Telegram is very popular, it seems to be, between people in Russia and Ukraine at the moment. It seems to be taking off now because, it's possible to circumvent this one, but it's getting convenient. And Telegram seems to be where all those can be blockade. And while Facebook isn't hugely big in terms of numbers, this is where your opinion leaders, opinion formers, influential journalists are. The same goes for Twitter, and they seem to be now flocking to Telegram as well. Just finally, Vitaly, tell me about this report in Pravda, which is a very precise number of Russian troops who've been killed in Ukraine. Now, Moscow Pravda is Russia's most popular daily, with very strong links to the Kremlin, the military and security services. And suddenly, today, it said online that 9,861 Russian soldiers have been killed in Ukraine. This number is staggering. It's more than the estimate given by officials in Washington. And it's much, much bigger than Russia's official number, which is 498. That number case for a war just a few days old. Also, the first person on Earth to be cured of COVID using a COVID vaccine rather than using a COVID vaccine to prevent getting it in the first place. Those stories coming up here on News Hour from the BBC World Service.
Now listen to what else you can hear from the BBC World Service. In 10 minutes, our series about saving the planet. Tomorrow, green expectations and more extreme weather is coming our way.
We're asking what financial safety nets are available
To help people wake up. Then the conversation is between women generating renewable energy.
Women on the framework can actually impact flight travel, those certain migratory birds. But one study then was, and I think that's something that really communicated or can not be an issue.
And at 23 GMT, it's Oakley.
After surviving a mountain accident that killed his best friend, Johnny Alberton spent years running from his trauma. He then discovered the healing power of other people's stories. He opens up about how he found some peace at last on Earth.
That's all still to come here on the BBC World Service. Now it's back to News Hour.
A reminder of our next story. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said Ukraine will never bow to ultimatums from Russia and surrender its biggest cities. As fighting continues from Mariupol in the south, it says Ukraine will never accept Russian occupation. In News Now, we've been hearing this account of life in Mariupol from Navda.
Wounded, without people, person who must be motivated. Like Tony, and look at the calm, I feel it. I'm sure I'm going to die in a matter of days, in this city. Everyone constantly waiting for death. I just wish this wasn't so frightening.
In other news, the foreign ministry in Moscow has summoned the US ambassador and warned relations with Washington are on the verge of rupture. There's more online at bbc.com/news. This is Andrew Finch in London with News Hour from the BBC World Service. Remember, you would have liked to have COVID or be told to isolate. Imagine constantly testing positive and having to stay in for more than 7 months. That's what happened to Ian from Caerphilly in Wales, whose infection finally ended when he became the first person in the world to have their COVID treated with a vaccine. These doctors think vaccines could change the care for people with symptoms infections. Our health and science correspondent Jamie Geiger went to meet him. There was a lot of TV watching. I read grown books, take the car, a lot. I didn't want anything. It just felt like everything was the same. I was living in Groundhog Day. You just end up doing nothing and sitting there scared of war. I've come to meet Ian Lester. He has a rare genetic condition that makes it much harder for his body to fight infection. Once he caught COVID, he just couldn't shift it, and he tested positive and stayed at home for more than 7 months. It slowly became a thing, especially when it got to the summertime and the restrictions were relaxing for everybody else and everybody could see family and friends started get back to real life and do things the old days. I was still getting positive results. Was it worrying? I just think that you start off with not really anything at all, and it's slowly getting worse at the time. You worry that the virus is going to get you upper hand. Yeah, I did. After the 3 months, I just couldn't see the end to it, and that's when I started feeling ill. The fatigue, the headaches, the tight chest.
I come to University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff to meet the team that has treated Ian.
Audience, welcome to the Immunity Hub Life for Wales. This is where all of the samples for Ian and the other immunization patients are assessed for their cells, their antibodies, and other parts of the immune system. Professor Stephen Jolly runs this hospital laboratory, which was closely monitoring the battle between the COVID virus and Ian's body. Ian was not able to clear the infection, so the team tried something new. At the time, our potential treatment funds were very limited. And so we had to think a little bit out of the box and use vaccination potentially in a setting where it's not normally used, which is to treat infection. I started by the immunology of this patient. How can the infection that he had for so long, he didn't build enough of an immune response to treat it, but a vaccine did? It's a really good question, and I think it speaks to the underlying deficiency that he had. So this infection was burbling along, but with his immune system was just not enough to kick off a response sufficient to clear it. So the vaccine really made a huge difference both in antibodies and T cells, and utilised and squeezed every last drop of what his immune system could do to clear that infection.
Stephen and his team were delighted when Ian started testing negative. It was the first time a vaccine had been used to treat COVID. They hope this approach can help others who can't shake the infection.
James Gallagher reporting. Poems written in the throes of war dates all the way back to the ancient Greeks, although perhaps the war poetry genre is most associated with the First World War, wartime conflict, and Imogen recalls the history they're witnessing and how they feel about it. Their work can now be shared so quickly that there is already an anthology of poems depicting the war in Ukraine, which began 4 weeks ago. The poets include soldiers, civilians, and refugees. One of them is Oksana Kovalenko, who's an English teacher from Nikolaev. She's been translating many of the poems into English, including her own wars.
This cupboard, this door, porcelain, plates, mirrors, tiles, jugs, jars with pickles, 13 bottles. They take sides with the enemy. They aim at your right, neck, stomach. Things can go crazy at any moment. Bury them in the past. Right now, only the walls. Only 2 walls protect you like the wings of an angel.
Oksana, thank you so much for reading that. Now, let me ask you what inspired you to write that poem that you just kindly shared with us.
A lot of Ukrainian cities have been underselling from the sky. We have been attacked by all kinds of artillery. And, we have been given instructions right on the internet. These instructions describe how to behave better during the shelling. There should be 2 walls that separate you from the street. So if the rocket or some missile hits your flat, it's kind of 2 walls are the best protection for you. And so we were advised to take off your sports balls, to remove all the glass objects, because they just most often will death.
And obviously, this is a time when you're in danger, the situation is incredibly stressful, everyone's incredibly busy, which you wouldn't necessarily associate with being creative. So why does it lead you and others to be creative in this way?
Probably this is an attempt to put your thoughts and emotions in some order. It creates some sort of control in the situation where you actually don't control anything. So, for intrusive it breaks all your life, and you need to figure out, to describe to yourself and probably to other people and to the world what's going on, not only outside but sometimes inside. It's the kind of, we have become the witnesses, and we witness the history, even if our bodies are destroyed physically, something will remain. So we are working on the project to show the poetry that has been created during these 26 dreadful days of the war. The project unites many people.
We've spoken, Oksana, about the tradition of war poetry. I guess what's different here is the fact that the poems can be pulled together online within days of the war breaking out.
It looks like the immediate diary that is created right on the spot. Our anthology of war poetry includes more than 50 authors. They are from every single corner of the place. They represent the nation, and they are written by witnesses, victims of the war, by civilians, but some of them are written by the military. Some describe what's going on with people who are refugees, who have become homeless in an instant, whose life was swept or broken. due to the war.
Oksana Kovalenko from Mykolaiv is now in Poland writing and translating poems for the anthology For Resistance, poems about the war in Ukraine. From me, Andrew Beach and the team in London, thank you for listening to News Hour.
This is the BBC World Service, and it's been 40 years since the Falkland Islands War.
Argentina invaded the islands on the 2nd of April 1982. Within days, Britain had sent a task force 8,000 miles to take them back. I'm Mike Woodridge. I'll be finding out how island life has changed since the war ended and how the islanders are marking the 40th anniversary.
Counting them in. Sunday, 14 GMT. And in 30 minutes, the conversation with Ken Chakanensa, an award-winning Kenyan engineer, talks to a Brazilian naval architect about the potential and power of wind energy. So, as we pass into the renewable sector, the challenges of being the only woman in the room is why clean energy needs a female perspective. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station. Global warming and extreme weather will become more frequent. We got 80% of Brisbane's average rainfall in 3 days. We got more rain in 3 days than you get in London in a year.
With billions of dollars needed to rebuild people's businesses, homes, and lives.
And across the road, it's just flood-ravaged houses. They're just filthy. The mud's halfway up the trees, halfway at the power poles. Mud and water went into houses. This week on the Climate Questions on the BBC World Service with Kate Lumble.
And me, Jordan Dunbar, we're asking, is insurance a safety net?
Very often, developing countries have less than 5%, sometimes less than 1% of their economic losses covered by insurance solutions, and this situation hasn't changed.
That's all coming up after the news.
This is the BBC News with Kieran MacDonald. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country will never bow to ultimatums from Russia to surrender its biggest cities. Kiev refused an offer of what Moscow termed safe passage for those in Mariupol as they laid down their arms. Local commanders said the death toll in Mariupol now exceeded 3,000. Some of its people have managed to escape to cities, including Dnipro. The BBC's Wira Davis is there.
The city of Mariupol is in ruins, with barely a building left unscathed by Russian shelling. But a Russian-imposed deadline for Mariupol's defenders to surrender was ignored, so the shelling continued. Some residents remain in makeshift shelters. Others fled north to cities including Dnipro, where there is help awaiting. Some of these people will stay in Dnipro, but others at the start of a long journey. As they escaped Mariupol, some were told by Russian soldiers to keep going, as this city too would soon be under attack.
Russia has summoned the U.S. ambassador to protest about statements by President Biden, who recently labelled President Putin a war criminal over the conflict in Ukraine. Russia's foreign ministry said recent statements were unworthy of a statesman and pushed Russian-American relations to breaking point. The State Department spokesman Ned Price said Moscow was in no position to criticize Washington.
It is only rich to hear a country speak about quote-unquote inappropriate comments when that same country is engaged in mass slaughter, including strikes and attacks that have resulted in civilian lives, an invasion of 100,000+ forces against a largely civilian population.
A report in a Russian newspaper has indicated that almost 10,000 Russian servicemen have been killed since the start of the invasion. On Sunday, an article on the website of the popular daily Komsomolskaya Pravda quoted the Russian Defense Ministry as saying that 9,801 Russian troops had been killed in Ukraine. The figures were later removed. European Union defence and foreign ministers have approved a new strategy to strengthen the bloc's defence, saying it needed to make a quantum leap forward in the current more hostile security environment. The EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, hailed it as a turning point and very timely.
There's not a lot for anything in Tuesday enough. The European armies will remain each member state has its own military outfit. But we have to work together closer. We have to coordinate better our expenditure. We have to be able to react. And one of the ways to react rapidly is this rapid deployment capacity.
You're listening to the latest world news, live from London. Washington has declared that the Burmese military's violence against the Rohingya minority amounted to crimes against humanity and genocide. Militant reports.
The minority group have long been denied citizenship in Myanmar. In 2017, the military junta forced at least 730,000 Rohingya from their homes into neighboring Bangladesh. In response, the UN fact-finding mission said top military figures must be investigated for genocide. Their report accused them of the gravest crimes, including murder, enslavement, gang-raping women, assaulting children, and burning entire villages.
The US has slapped sanctions on an elite police division accused of violence against protesters in Sudan. The sanctions freeze any US assets held by members of the unit and bar Americans from dealing with them. Our Africa editor Mary Harper reports.
The U.S. Treasury Department said the Central Reserve Police has been at the forefront of what it described as the violent response towards protesters. It said they've used excessive force, including live ammunition. Nearly 90 demonstrators have been killed since the army takeover last October. The police unit was deployed during the long war in Sudan's western region of Darfur, in which 1/3 people were killed.
Zambia's anti-corruption body has arrested the leader of the main opposition party, accusing him of massive corruption. The head of the former ruling Patriotic Front, Gideon Lubinda, has not yet commented on the allegations that he misappropriated more than $500,000. Zambia's president, Hakainde Hichilema, promised to fight corruption after he was elected last year. Several senior members of the former administration have been charged with corruption. BBC News.
BBC World Service. This is the Planet Question with Kate Marble.
I'm Jordan Dunbar. This week we're looking at insurance and asking whether it can provide a safety net for our homes and businesses as the climate changes.
I think we should start by taking you straight to somebody already in need of that safety net. Last month, Brisbane in eastern Australia was flooded.
Robin McConkie is a reporter in the area.
Well, right now I'm in Goodna, which is one of the worst affected suburbs in Brisbane. I'm standing by a creek. It's about 10 metres below me. And yet, above me, the trees are covered in mud.
Mud, oh God, Robin, how the water sat just a few weeks ago.
At the end of February, a massive weather system formed off the coast of Australia.
Normally, these things would pass through pretty quickly and move out to sea, but this one kind of got stuck.
So much water was released that people started calling it a rainfall.
We got 80% of Brisbane's average rainfall in 3 days. We got more rain in 3 days than you get in London in a year, just in the Brisbane area. And it just came and it just felt it.
When did it start?
Well, on about Wednesday, an area about 3 hours north of Brisbane, they started saying that that's going to be flooded. It's called Gympie. Gympie ended up with the worst floods ever. So that was on the Wednesday, and I used to play golf on the Friday in an area not far from where I'm standing now. And I finally gave up because the kangaroos were looking there as if I was stupid when I was boring with rain. So I went home, and on Friday, it really started filtering down in Brisbane. By Sunday morning, Brisbane was underwater. So it really only took a couple of days for the whole city to be underwater.
Water continues to rise. There have been more than 6,000 calls for help, and tens of thousands of homes are expected to go under across the east coast this morning in a rapidly unfolding flood emergency. Tracy Daly of the Eco Company. The website is full of clean, bright pictures of reusable coffee mugs and vegan lip balms.
But now Tracy's sifting through products in a warehouse, trying to see what they can wash them out save. They only moved in a couple of months ago.
It was our dream to move into a nice spacious warehouse, and on Friday night I stood there with my customer service manager at 5 p.m. and we actually gave each other a little hug and said, this is it, we are settled, we're organised, we've done it. And then Saturday night the flood came through.
They're already starting work fixing the damage at the nearby car repair shop.
But George, who was there, says there's a long road ahead.
Yeah, we've got a whole lot of machinery there. That's all written off. Anything electronic or electrical is wrecked. Everything's got to get replaced. All computers, all the wiring, everything.
George, how do you feel about all of this?
I had a good old cry. Reality happens, so have to keep going.
One thing that can help people and businesses keep going is insurance. The idea is that you pay a company a small amount of money each month. In return, in the event of an emergency, that company will give you their funds to make sure you can recover from the damage.
Marianne Golder-Maggie knows all about this. She's Director of Climate Change and Environment at an insurance industry think tank, the Geneva Association.
She says insurance availability can have a marked impact on how well areas recover from natural disasters like flooding.
In places where insurance is available to more people, businesses, and governments, recover much faster and more efficiently after a disaster than places that they don't have that. In fact, it's shown that those that have access to insurance may even experience positive economic activity.
So that means that actually it becomes a positive when they recover. They make more money, life improves.
They potentially could make more money coming from economic activity from building back.
Building back can cost a vast amount of money. Despite fixing everything and posting with insurance, you require at least $2 billion US.
That's one of the bigger payouts. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans in the United States and cost the insurance industry something like $66 billion US.
Just think about it. Despite massive losses that the industry has incurred over the last years associated with extreme level of weather-related risks, you have not heard a company becoming, as a result, insolvent, or in other words, to go bankrupt.
Big insurers can afford to cover these vast sums required. Firstly, because they have lots of customers. Not all of them will be hit by disaster. Many will just pay in without ever needing support.
And insurance companies also do things like take out their own insurance in case things go wrong and they need to pay lots of customers at once. But Marianne says insurers don't just help by providing cash in the event of an emergency. They also invest in prevention.
Insurance companies are actually taking a lot of steps in conducting adaptation research. And what does that mean? They're looking at ways a homeowner can reduce the risk of floods to their homes. And then if the policyholder actually does make those changes, insurance companies offer incentives by way of, for example, reduced premiums.
This all sounds great. In theory, if everyone had insurance and it all worked fairly, in a climate emergency, everyone could claim to get help to rebuild and they'd be encouraged to be better prepared for future events too.
But sadly, it's clear to me that not everyone has insurance.
In this area, I reckon you'd see 1 in 10 down in flood-prone areas, nobody's insured. I mean, I think it really is it's a social issue. People just can't afford flood insurance in areas like this.
The thing is, insurance companies charge more to cover a property if the risk of an emergency happening is higher.
If you live in a flood-prone area, insurers are likely to have to pay out more often, so they need to cover those losses.
The next part of Brisbane is known to be at risk. They've been here before. Back in 2011, thousands of people had to be evacuated from low-lying areas after a period of heavy rain. The news from back then seems eerily familiar.
It's a matter of task as mountains of ruined belongings build up on suburban footpaths. It's a war on mud and fresh sludge, and Defence Force personnel have joined the battle. Their job is
As a result, not everyone can afford to keep themselves insured. You can see the difference that can make on just one street that Robin visited.
Liam and his family were evacuated from their home. They weren't able to drive back until nearly a week later.
We're fully covered, and the last I've heard is that we are pre-approved to start refurbishments and stuff like that on the property, so unlike some others that aren't as lucky as us, we are covered. Yeah.
Just 3 houses down, Robin met Reza and Tardina, who are less lucky.
Everything in your house looks like it's gone.
yeah, everything. Fridges, bed, furniture, everything. What are you going to do? I don't know. Yeah, it's very hard.
We are lucky we got a friend and he invited us to come over to stay with them. But, it's really hard with the 3 boys.
And are you insured?
No, I'm not sure, unfortunately.
Would you like to be insured? I mean, or is it too expensive? Why pay insured?
Yes, I would like to insure it, but it's too expensive because the flooding area is really, really expensive to insure. I can't afford it that much.
Without support, it could take years to find the funds to replace everything.
And the really devastating thing is that Reza and Tardina bought their house at a discount after it was damaged in the 2011 floods. They've dedicated themselves to restoring and repairing it. But now they say it's that insane situation.
It was a bit of a risk buying it after the 2011, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is risky, but I didn't thought it's going to be happen again. And that's my son,
James Ralph works with a reinsurance company with Nick Reed. They've got a database set up in the 1970s which shows that weather-related catastrophes have been increasing in both frequency and intensity.
You could just get people